Note. So I had the privilege of going to every room to see what Canoe Lake, Flying Dust, and Waterhen are doing in their schools with that connection to that land-language relationships and culture. And all I have to say is that I'm totally blown away. I don't think that we give ourselves enough recognition and credit for our learning process. I don't think we think enough about the amazing work that we're doing. I feel that we think it's not enough. But what I've seen in the 3 salons, I want to make sure that I acknowledge the hard work, the essential conversations that happen in the schools, and essentially decolonizing the curriculum. It's such an exciting time in education, but it's also very challenging. Our kids are changing. They don't think the same. It's harder, it's almost like it's harder to reach them. But the things that I've seen in our schools, we do know that that is a huge foundational component to helping our kids. And I just want to make sure that I say, thank you so very much for the 3 schools that did present. And then the sessions after Dr. Chris Scribe, we're going to see more. And I also do want to go ahead and say thank you very much for all the hard work that you've put in. And I did see Celia in the hallway. I said, you need to get into every one of those salons. You need to see. When I introduced her about planting those seeds, they were there. And I'm going to get emotional. And I shouldn't point at, just go like this. And I have no words. So you keep doing what you're doing, sister. It's much needed. My community needs you. And you let the Creator do the work through you. Okay? So it's with great honor that I get to introduce Dr. Chris Scribe. I've known this man for a really long time. When he graduated he's an ITEP alumni. When he graduated from ITEP, his first position was at Thunderchild School. That's where I shacked up, not at the school, in the community, Kaptiguna. Been there for 25 years. My mom, you know that, cutting that apron strings and you fly out of the nest? You go, you move on. Well, I did that back in 1999, and it just so happened, I'll just pick Thunderchild because it was halfway in between Edmonton, where my parents lived, and then Saskatoon, where I was leaving from. And eventually my mom came there, and she taught there for 12 years. Well, when Chris graduated, he went over to Thunderchild, because there was a TEP program through ITEP that was right in Thunderchild itself. And my mom took him underneath her wing. And then she also adopted him as her son. Chris does amazing work. Not only is he grounded in his culture, in language, in land, his whole family are dancers. And if you were paying attention, or if you know Chris, his children were in our opening ceremonies. His children are also from Makwa. Chris is also a Swampy Cree. That's part of his who he is. He's also a member of Carry the Kettle. Whereas Kushi, am I saying it right? Kushi is from has his PhD, and does lots of great work all over Indian country. Does nation building. He's done amazing work with my home community, from what Celia has shared today during the keynote, but also did amazing work in MLTC. Just before COVID hit, went through a transformational learning and a number of things that we would have conversations about. And a lot of you have taken that Indigenous trauma liberation training, because we solely believe that if our teachers are good, our students are good. That we not only try to create space and place for our kids to heal, but we have to create a space and place for our teachers to heal. His mother-in-law, Julie Olette, was sharing something with me about, and I can't say it, I'm not fluent in my language, although I'm trying, about the Cree word for school. And she had said that school was a place, like a place of crying, right? Where people would cry. And probably back down in that day, that crying part was the negative things, like the residential schools, what they were doing to our chapans and our grandmas and our mushamans and kukums hama, and our aunties and our uncles and our mums and our dads. Nigawi, nutawi, or namama, napapa. And I was thinking about that, and I was thinking, conversations with Chris. That Cree word, I feel, is, to me, maybe can transform. That it's okay that the place where we call a school is a place to cry. But not cry because of hurts being done to us, but a place of crying because crying is a part of healing. Crying is a part of recovering and accepting our trauma and letting it go. I know the Creator leads and guides Chris every day. And I know that you're in for truth. I know that He's going to move within you for the things that He's going to say today. So it's with great honor, and if you wouldn't mind, helping welcome Dr. Chris Scribe. Can I get a water bottle? Can I get a water bottle?
Keep clapping while he makes his way up here.
Did you want
Big,
this
massive.
one?
I'm going to use this. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah. Oh, I'm good. I'm good. Okay. Thank you. All right. Smokes. All right. Hey, first time for everything. Hey, sorry for yelling earlier. I just don't mean to get people mad. If you are offended by what I say, I have two mother-in-laws here. You can go and hit them. Yeah, all right. This is a first for me. In my whole life of talking and doing this, only once, this is not a first, only once in the grade 9 Chief Palmmaker School oratory contest have I ever written a speech. But I wrote one while I was sitting here at lunchtime break, before while listening to Celia. But I was listening to you, Celia, don't worry. I wasn't acting like my relatives over there from Turner that were just talking amongst themselves about shopping at Value Village. I was listening to you. I told I was going to look at them. So I want to read this speech. I apologize for doing this. This is not normal procedure. In fact, this is something that we don't always do. And I'm holding a handheld mic, so it's going to be hard. And it's dark. And, I'm mid-40s, and I need real thick glasses to read. So maybe I'll use my phone for the light so that I could see, really get worse here. And Don't worry, you guys. It's going to be a good presentation, a good keynote. You guys are going to enjoy it. Trust me. Holy smokes. Okay, I'm going to read it word for word, just so you know. Don't worry, there's no swearing in here, I don't think. Honored elders, educators, community leaders, distinguished guests. Danse et lanete. Today I stand before you with a vision that remains clear as ever, a vision for our children to embrace their Indigenous identity, to thrive in an education system that integrates who they are, and to ensure that they continue forward in their learning journey without fear, discouragement, or disengagement. Gatherings such as this are an important step forward toward securing this vision. We reaffirm our commitment to a future where our children not only understand their Indigenous language, but love learning in an environment that reflects their identity. We set forth this position because we recognize that when education respects and embraces our culture, our children will not only stay in school, but excel. We will find joy in learning, and through that joy, they will gain knowledge that will stay with them for a lifetime. If we accomplish this, if we create schools where our children feel seen, valued, and inspired, then they will see real change. They will transition into higher levels of learning with confidence, without fear of failure, and without the urge to leave their education behind. But this is not a journey that we can walk alone. Our people must come together in discussion, in action, and in prayer. We must acknowledge that the success of our children is not solely in our hands. We must ask Creator for guidance, for wisdom, and for strength to lead them on the right path. It is not only parents who bear this responsibility. Every member of our community, educators, elders, leaders, allies, can contribute to this mission. They too can keep our children in mind and in prayer so that they may be blessed with the knowledge, wisdom, and unbreakable connection to their Indigenous identity. We must teach our children to love the Creator, to understand their place in the great design, and to live with respect, integrity, and purpose. When they carry this understanding with them, they will live with honor, guided by the values we all hold dear. This means strengthening our language, not only in our schools, but in our homes. Children need encouragement. They need consistency. If we speak our language with them, teach them, and inspire them daily, they will grow up proud of who they are. Today, we reaffirm our commitment to Indigenous education. Today, we declare that our children deserve a learning experience that does not force them to choose between success and identity, but one that nurtures both. Let us walk forward together with unity, strength, and faith in the future we are building. Exam. Sorry, I'm trying to shut my light off. That's a real deadly speech, by the way. I wrote it. Hey. Anyways. Holy cow. I'll just kill my battery. All right. I wanted to start that way. I need to have a mic to kind of move around, so I'm going to move around and do this. And, I really, really want to say thank you to MLTC and the Full Circle Conference for inviting me here. And I know that we've heard a lot of different things, and I'm going to share some perspectives about, my views on education. I'm going to share the best way that I know how with all of you, because I really, truly believe that education is the greatest tool that we have to supporting the success of our communities. And what that looks like, how we build that, it's really centered around that. I hear a lot of academics, and I go to a lot of conferences. In 1 year, I remember a few, back in when I was working at a university, I did 100 keynotes that I marked down and remembered. And I've been there to these keynotes and Indigenous knowledge places and spaces, and I didn't hear anybody say we need to pray for our children. That's an important aspect of who we are as Indigenous people. There is no PD that you have went to in your schools where they say you need to pray to Creator so that your children are successful. Why is that? We're afraid of the thought of praying to Creator because we're afraid to offend traditional Indians, and we're afraid to offend Christian Indians, or we're afraid to offend atheist Indians. But ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, teachers, educators, Indian people were given the gift to connect to Creator to help us. So we need to act as if that's an important part of our lives. That's an important part of what we do. Every word that I read on that speech that I wrote is relevant today. And this title, this is the first time I need to apologize if I make mistakes or whatever it is. This is the first time I did this. I did this especially for you. I haven't done this presentation before. So we'll pretend that we didn't make mistakes. But this is called Dreams of Our Ancestors. And it's an Indigenous guide to disrupting colonial education. I've spent a lot of time in my journey as an educator doing this work and creating spaces and finding an avenue to find answers for our kids. So as we do this, every teacher that works for Indian people, every single teacher that works for Indian people in our Indian communities needs to have read The Unjust Society by Harold Cardinal. This book was written in the 70s on the emergence of what I call the Indigenous Education Revolution. So at the Indigenous Education Revolution, this book was written on the heels of what's called Indian control of Indian education. The speech that I read to you, it's relevant today. Everything that I talked about, we can, find something that's meaningful for us in that speech. Hopefully you found something in there. But ladies and gentlemen, in 1976, a visionary and a leader that started the Federation of Indian Nations said the exact same words that I said. Exact same words, they were just worded differently. I took John B. Tatusis' speech and I rewrote it and read it to you. In 1976, relatives, he said that, and it's relevant. We need to create an education that builds up our identities, that fosters language, that builds a connection so kids are proud of who they are. We need to ensure that when we do the work that for our children and our young people, that we pray to Creator so that they can get it. We need all the help that we can get. He said that in 1976. It is 2025, and in 40 years, if somebody is reading my speech and it's still relevant, what have we done? All of us in this room, whatever position that you play in your educational journey, in your classroom, in your job, you have a role to play. But we need to understand what it means. What does Indian control of Indian education mean to you? We need to ask ourselves that question. We need to ask, what does it mean in my classroom to be in control of my education? What does that mean? We are facing one of the most deadliest epidemics that we can face right now. And I don't have to tell this group of people about the realities that our young people are facing in our communities. I don't have to stand up here and tell you about suicide, about drug abuse, about alcoholism, about intergenerational trauma. I don't have to tell you about that because you live it every day. So how are we going to figure out how we support our kids to move through that? It is way worse for our kids today than it was for us going to school in our communities. If we think about it, do we think it's safe for our children to walk alone at night back home? Do we feel that it's okay for our young girls to go out and visit friends? Or are you worried about them? Are you scared about that? Life has changed. The way that our society is, it's changed, it's different. So we have to reestablish our connection. And I share this book because this one here acts as a foundation for creating the space. So before we do that, we have to understand what colonial education is, all right? Where it started in the foundation that we have. So each and every one of us that are working in a school is built, the education system is built on a white way of thinking. The foundation was built for old white men to succeed. It wasn't built for women. It wasn't built for people of color. It wasn't built for, us and you. It was built for old white guys to be the top of the ladder of success. Everybody else was just taking up space to work for that person. And colonial education, the foundation of it, is just exactly that. Look at the history of it. Look at what that means. And it is not only us living here in our territory in Saskatchewan or in Canada. This is a strategic tool to eliminate and assimilate the indigenous population to a non-native way of thinking, because that's what the education system was designed to do. So when the foundation of our education system is exactly that, when it is exactly to destroy the Indian and the child, then that's what it's going to always gravitate to. So when it gravitates to that, we do everything in our power, man. We create space. We do everything that we can to try and sort out our kids so that they can be successful, but something's always drawing our kids back to failure. So what do? We try to figure out tools in order to combat that. But it's so large. We don't understand the enormity of colonial education. There is a documentary that's free on YouTube that you can watch that will talk about what colonial education is and how it's used as a tool and a weapon to eliminate indigeneity. And that documentary is called Schooling the World. And here's a trailer for it to give you a little bit of explanation. So hopefully we got that working.
I think we see education as crucial. It's an absolutely necessary condition for sustained poverty reduction.
Western schooling is responsible for introducing a human monoculture across the entire world.
We sort of think that, we educate our kids, we send our kids to school, and peoples who don't mimic those same patterns of education somehow don't educate their kids. Well, of course, that is absurd. I
don't know about my culture very much.
Nobody speaks the fluent Ladakhi.
Yeah, if somebody speaks Ladakhi or Hindi, then teacher give him or her punished him.
We moved from wisdom to knowledge, and now we are moving from knowledge to information, and that information is so partial.
We just after money.
One of the things that's most disturbing to me is that you have an institution that is in place globally that is branding millions and millions and millions of innocent people as failures.
Most of the students of Ladakh, they don't do very well.
90% end up failures.
They're in-between people, and they're falling through the cracks of an in-between world.
We put out this idea, which I think is a blatant lie, that if people buy into the dictates of our economic paradigm, that somehow they will magically achieve the wealth that we enjoy in the West. Ain't gonna happen.
This model isn't even working in America.
And I think the profound kind of damage that it's doing, we'll recognize generations from now, and we'll look back and say, how could we have done this kind of thing to people?
There is an assumption that Western education is something that is superior.
These peoples aren't failed attempts at being us. They're unique answers to the fundamental question, what does it mean to be human and alive?
The intent really is to get every child into school.
For if we are to fit and train such children for the future, they cannot be left as they are.
Potara kalaya kon school yalba ta jere dika borban kle kon school rulea school yalba chale ta jere khira kle.
This type of education is a tool that is a global idea that the quickest, most effective way to destroy a culture is through education. The quickest, easiest, most effective way to destroy a culture is through education. That's the idea that was built, the foundation that was built for indigenous folks here in our country, for us. That's what they intended education for our parents to be. In 1896, a 41-pound, 6-year-old boy walked to Regina Industrial School. This young boy, 6 years old, his name was Wamnia Hokshina. He was dressed in traditional clothing, moccasins made by his mother, leggings, and a shirt made with traditional Dakota and Nakota designs. And he was walked into an education building that did not value what that was. That man, his name was Charles Ryder Jr., and that was my great-great-grandfather. And my grandfather, that was our family's first interaction with Western education. They put him into a school that was designed not for him to excel as a learner and a thinker and a critical thinker. They put him into a school to create a laborer, to work jobs for all of the people that should be successful. And amidst all of that, they used education as a tool to destroy this man. But he had this strong sense of faith and belief in who he was as an Indian. So that strong sense of faith and that belief, they couldn't touch him. They kept that, and he was able to keep that strong and allowing that to continue on with his family. So when we look at the foundation that was built for education, we need to be truthful with ourselves and what it is and what that actually means. That means that that foundation is rooted and created for capitalism. When you think of the most successful person that you can think of on this planet that's indigenous, we think about the person that's the most wealthy, that has the most mazaska, the most suniao. That's the one that's driving the Land Rover. The most successful person in our community is the one that's mastered capitalism. Why is it that we don't think that the most successful person in our community is the elder that practices the culture, language, and traditions that from our community that kept it alive and strong? Why don't we uplift that as being the one that's the most important? I'm standing up here and I have the max amount of Western colonial education that a human being can get. I have a PhD, and nobody can get more education than that. So I can look at every single non-indigenous person in the eye and say, you have to listen to me because I have the same, if not more education than you. But that's only value that has for me. What's the most important thing to me is how my grandmother raised me to be Indian. That's why I'm standing here. It's not because I went into a space and pushed my indigeneity aside and sat in a classroom and I was really good at being a non-indigenous student in that room. It's because I stood in there and took up space and I was an Indian every single space that I went into. And that's why I'm invited to share this, because this is where it is. The other thing that's important to talk about is this myth that we've all come to think about as meritocracy. That if you work hard, you're going to be successful. That no matter what, if you're not successful, it's because you're lazy. If you don't want to work hard, you're not going to. Well, that's not true. For Indigenous people and our children living in our communities, no matter how hard they work, if they're not working to create and distance themselves from trauma, to heal from that and heal from our realities and living on our communities and being Indigenous, then working hard doesn't mean anything. That it's more difficult for us to create that. So stop telling our kids that they're lazy or they're not going to make it. Let's get out of that mindset that if you work hard, you're going to be successful in this world. That's not the truth. We're lying to our kids. One part. If we are to succeed in the current education system that's in place right now, then we have to compromise who we are as Indigenous people. If we are to succeed in the education system that we have right now, we have to compromise who we are. That is not okay. That is not something that any of us working with Indian children in our communities should be okay with. We can add feathers and medicine wheels to the worksheets of our children and say that we're combating colonial education, but it's not. It'll always gravitate us back to what it's meant to do. So what do we do in that situation? We need to arm ourselves with knowledge and find out what this is and what this means. Luckily, just like I sat in here and I listened to the presentations that are going on, listen to my good friend Celia and the presentations that they're talking about. There's good work that's happening out there that's foundational work that we need to think about and we need to access. But we also need to understand what Indigenous education is. Now, this is going to be important for us to know. Who thinks that quality education and the amount of hours that you teach a subject go hand in hand? You are taught and told by administrators and you're taught by principals that you need to have 174 hours of math instructional time per. If you fall below that, the kids are going to fall below that. Guess what? The most successful school in the history of the world in education happens in Finland. And guess how much hours of instructional time per week those children have at the max? 20. That is less than 4 hours. I don't know. Let's calculate that. 4 hours per day. What else do they do? Everything is about experiential learning, experience through play, experience and understanding. Going out, it's about storytelling. It's about having conversations with each other, with the children. It's about valuing the teachers as knowledge carriers and putting them up as some of the most important people in our community. These are all concepts, and it's about learning is happening constantly no matter where you are, and you don't need to be subjected into a box in order to learn that. These are all Indigenous ways of thinking. This is how we educated. So what does that look like? I mean, I'm standing up here and we're talking about the realities of this, and man, it's depressing. They're just like, man, I didn't come to listen to this and feel bad, you know? We don't. We are doing good things in our community, but we do them in isolation. I was having a conversation with my friend Joe this morning, and Joe is he's a phenomenal land-based educator. Like he should be, on a YouTube influencer somewhere making millions of dollars off his videos. We'll talk about that, bro. But we need to get that kind of knowledge at the forefront of what we do. But we're talking about working in isolation. And we do a really good job about that. And it's designed to do it that way. So what does it look like today to change the foundation of indigeneity, change the foundation of colonial education to Indigenous education? It means destroying what we know and what we feel comfortable in doing and recreating something in the image that our ancestors prayed for and dreamed of. And this is a good example.
at the number of existing elders who spoke Ojibwe fluently, who were raised with Ojibwe as a first language, were vastly diminishing. So we knew we had to do something quick, and so that's why we started Warukudaring.
Warukudaring, it's a place where our language lives, where the Ojibwe language lives.
Vebakan, inabikizajig, the abaji egwa ginoe gashi egg, nashke dash basic.
Language, I think with any cultural practice, it has a specific vocabulary and teachings that are associated with each activity in that practice. So, for instance, all the words about boiling sap, the way that it boils, have specific terms that describe it very, very accurately, that allow you to develop a deep comprehension of the activity and why you do it and how you do it.
Oma, Wayne Jijuan Zinzabakudabu Mitigong, Wiko Viduyan, Akina, Zinzabakudabu, Aking da Atamagad.
I always say it's an educational experience for students, but it's a community movement. We're facing some really unique challenges right now.
We have a lot of statistics that are against us, that we have a lot of issues with abuse and suicide that show us as not being the most healthy of communities. And I always think of it not just in terms of our culture surviving, but really our people surviving.
I didn't learn to speak Ojibwe as a child, but when I started studying it as an adult in college, I quickly realized how much knowledge and capacity there is in a language to know who you are, where you come from, how to see the world in that unique way. It's certainly academically rigorous. It's not just a culture program, it's not just a language program. Ultimately, it's prepping them and building an intellectual framework that they'll be able to apply to and adapt to, no matter where they are in the world. That will help them. And I think they're prepared with knowledge and ability that they feel proud of, that they feel connected to their ancestry in a deeper way. They have a much broader and deeper understanding of Ojibwe perspective in relation to the local community, the local environment, and the world.
So that video there comes from a community in Wisconsin. And there's a lot of really cool things that are happening out there within public education. The education in the United States is not as flexible as it is for us working in our communities, in our First Nations. They face a lot of barriers and a lot of challenges to what they do, but they find space and create space and they go forward and do it. And some of the charter schools that exist within the United States, they have freedom to deliver education from an Indigenous perspective. But when you think about, how we address that, how we learn and what we do to learn about how to support our kids, we don't always look at the charter schools and the systems that are out there that are successful. How many times have we had conversations with the grade-alike teachers on our own without a push from MLTC or a gathering where we're phoning and saying, what are you doing in your grade 2 class to teach language, to enforce it while I'm teaching science right now? What are you doing in your class right now in phys ed to ensure that we're incorporating Indigenous games relevant to us? Let's have those conversations. Instead, we work on in isolation and we learn from, textbooks or some, academic standing at the front talking, but we have access to these places. We as educators working in our communities, there is a huge elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room is trauma. We can't talk about Indian education, can't talk about our movement forward unless we look at how we heal. This is an important part of our journey as educators and as people working with young people. Now, I'm gonna share a short video here about generational trauma. And I need to make sure, that we have people that we can go to, if we're triggered about some certain things or whatever. There's not going to be specifics talking about. But we look in our school, and when I'm teaching in the classroom, I'm triggered every single day. Tell me I'm lying, because we see trauma cycling within the children in our communities, in our classrooms. That's the truth. We see it. And how do we heal? How do we stop that cycle? How do we break it? We all participate somehow. Because if we haven't done the work ourselves as educators, we're going to continue to perpetuate the same thing over and over. That's a psychological way to do it. So rooted in this colonial foundation, rooted in how we build a foundation of education, is this idea is that we need to use violence in order to do that. And how we do and how we move forward through that is this video talks about these 3 really cool things. Number 1, we need to recognize. Number 2, we need to repair. And number 3, we need to rebuild. And rebuild from that and create that space. When we do that, we are stronger as a nation. And we're stronger as an education system, and we're stronger as a school, we're stronger as a staff. When you were here, you would have possibly contributed to something called lateral violence, or heard it, or was a part of it. Okay? Leadership that are here in the room. Okay, nobody told you that everybody is going to talk shit about you, but they do. Why do we do that to our leaders? What's the purpose for behind that? So my mother-in-law is a counselor, and she gave me a house, and I'm not even a band member, and she approved that. That's none of your business, you guys. Hey, just kidding. I don't have a house. Real deadly. Yeah. But, we go back and we talk about it. And when is it the most unhealthy in our communities? Election time. Man, you just sit back like Kermit the Frog sipping that, or eating popcorn, or a Michael Jackson meme, eating popcorn. Even worse is when we start getting payments in our communities. The unhealthiness comes up and it's alive. It's all part of the cycle of intergenerational trauma. We're continuing that cycle by participating in that. You have a problem and an issue with somebody, you go and talk to them. You don't use that as a weapon for your own benefit, and you also don't use that to continue to talk about them without other people. You hear something negative about somebody, you ask the person to stop. I'm going to ask them myself. Simple. It's an easy tool, but we don't do it because it feels better to do it this other way.
How is generational trauma passed down? Generational trauma is transferred both genetically and culturally. Trauma can lead to changes in our DNA. For instance, studies show that trauma can cause epigenetic changes, like DNA methylation, which can make future generations more vulnerable to conditions like depression and PTSD. Similarly, trauma can be passed down culturally through learned behaviors and patterns within families. Unhealthy habits and ways of coping can be passed from grandparents to parents and then to children. If you're wondering if this applies to you, we will talk about 2 examples. Let's see if you can relate to any of them. Consider Sai and Sai's sister. They grew up with an abusive father who struggled with addiction. For their safety, they had to live with their maternal grandmother, who believed in harsh discipline like spanking, yelling, and shaming, which did nothing to improve the children's behavior. It only made matters worse. Sai, labeled hyperactive and disruptive, was already getting into fights at school, while his sister developed anxiety and low self-esteem. Not only was she treated harshly at home, but she was also bullied at school due to her timid and insecure nature. Their early and repeated exposure to trauma elevated their body's stress hormones like cortisol, which can be damaging to their brain and body systems, setting the stage for future dysfunctional behaviors. In another example, Sai from an alternate universe had a mother who became emotionally numb after losing her own mother. This emotional numbness unknowingly affected Sai, leading to an insecure attachment style. Sai developed a fear of abandonment and became overly dependent on her partners for reassurance and validation, while struggling to trust others. As a result, Sai might become clingy in relationships or push people away to avoid getting hurt. In his quest to find the love and care she missed as a child, Sai may seek out partners that are unsuited for her and end up perpetuating the cycle of trauma. If you find this video insightful, like and subscribe for more. Major signs of generational trauma. Generational trauma manifests in various ways, impacting our emotions, mental health, physical well-being, and behavior. Here are some common signs. Number 1, codependency. Codependency means relying too much on others for emotional support or approval. This often happens if you grew up in a family with unstable relationships or emotional neglect. Number 2, hypervigilance. You feel worried all the time or always on edge as if danger is around every corner. This can be an inherited stress response. Number 3, unhealthy attachment styles and dysfunctional family dynamics. Generational trauma can lead to frequent issues and arguments within the family. This can affect you and your relationships. It might make you afraid of being abandoned, emotionally distant, make your relationships feel unstable. Number 4, family history of mental health and substance abuse. Sometimes family trauma can lead to conditions like PTSD, anxiety, or depression. When substance abuse runs in the family, it can become a way of coping that gets passed down through generations. Number 5, excessive fear of death. While everyone fears death, generational trauma can make this fear extreme or excessive. This can be linked to the life-threatening events your ancestors went through. For example, if your parents survived a ghastly car accident, you might develop an unusual fear of dying when traveling on the road. Number 6, low self-esteem and self-destructive behaviors. Growing up in a family where there was a lot of criticism or neglect can make you see yourself in a negative way. It causes deep-seated pain, lowers your confidence, and makes you hate yourself. In severe cases, it may even lead to hurting yourself on purpose. So, what can you do if you're dealing with generational trauma? Let's break it down into 3 simple steps. Recognize, repair, and rebuild. Recognize. Take a moment to reflect on your life and experiences. Identify any ways you act, feel, or think that might be a result of past trauma. Talk to a therapist to understand this better and get support. Seek a professional diagnosis and address feelings of guilt or shame that are making your symptoms worse. Talk openly with trusted family members to help them understand and support you better as well. Repair. Once you've acknowledged the trauma, you can start your healing journey. Work with a psychotherapist to understand where your trauma comes from and to learn ways to cope and heal. Connect with supportive and non-judgmental people who allow you to process your feelings, uplift your spirit, make you feel safe. Family therapy can also be helpful for everyone to heal together. Rebuild. Focus on taking care of yourself by practicing mindfulness and daily meditation. Eat nutritious foods and make sure you get good sleep to help your brain and mood. Engage in relaxing activities like exercise, hobbies, or time in nature to reduce stress. If you're on medication, follow your doctor's instructions carefully and don't skip any doses. Moving forward, healing from trauma takes time, and it's different for everyone. There is no fixed timeline. It might take months or years, so be gentle with yourself as you make progress. Remember, generational trauma doesn't have to define you or your future. Instead of passing down pain, we can pass down healing. By taking proactive steps to recognize, repair, and rebuild, we can heal, end the cycle of trauma, and create a better and healthier future for ourselves and future generations. Want to learn more about how to deal with trauma?
So when we look at what that means and how we build that up, we need to be truthful with ourselves and where we come from and how we do that. How do we perpetuate that? Because when we face something that's similar that a kid went through, they talked about, if parents die tragically in a car accident, you have this fear of driving, of going in a car. Well, look at the experience and the trauma that a lot of our parents and grandparents went through by going to residential school. So that's passed down, so we become more susceptible to these things. Who in their schools is dealing with anxiety and mental health issues and like it's just an alarming rate where you're like, holy smokes, what do I do? It's because of the trauma, and we're in this state of not recognizing it first in ourselves and figuring out how we do that and build that within our communities. We as a group, this is important. So I'm going to introduce myself in my language. Well, kinda. So, Tansa gumagante, Chris Scribe nitsigasan, kinaseo CPU chinia. Now I said kinda because I introduced myself in Plains Cree. And, I'm actually in dialect Cree from Norway House Cree Nation. How konabi togahe amani amachiabi, chega gena gichataya hibi. I'm a citizen of Carry the Kettle, Nakota Oyate, in Treaty 4 territory. But I'm also a band custom member and adopted member of Palmaker Cree Nation. And in my upbringing in that place, I was adopted by a man by the name of Edwin Tatusis and Millie Tatusis, who instilled a really strong cultural foundation in who I am. Now, at the time, and I want to story tell quickly here. I know we might be running out of time. Hopefully you're not too bored. Actually, before we do that, can everybody just stand up real quick? Let's do an activity. You guys have been sitting down there. Holy smokes, had a deadly lunch. Everybody, nipawe. Or I wish I knew how to say that in Dene Sutle. What I don't. I can only fake talk the Dene language, all right? And this is not to offend anybody, but this is my attempt at the Dene language. Icy road conditions. Yeah, I don't know. That's the best I can do, Yeah, I give permission to my Dene relatives to pretend to talk Cree, Yeah. All right, so where you're standing right now, here's what I want you to do, all right? I want you to reach up real super high. I'm not going to do it because I might show my belly. Hey, no, just kidding. Reach up as high as you can, all right? Just one hand, not two, just one hand, all right? Okay, I want you to outstretch your fingers so that you can really feel your fingers kind of stretching out there, all right? Now, I want you to go this way and then go this way, okay? Now, keep going back and forth. All right, okay, other hand. Put your other hand in the air. Same thing. Okay, nice. Oh, stretch your fingers out real good. Okay, wave your hands in the air like you just don't care. Yeah, just keep going. That's the way. All right, cool. All right, here's what I want us to do, all right? Geez, this is such a big room, and I'm looking in the back to see if people are listening. There's a couple of people sitting down on their phone. Still standing up. Okay, we got to have room for this. I'm going to put the mic down and try talk super loud, okay? Or maybe you can hear me. All right, so wherever you are, I want you to clap your hands 10 times really fast. Wait, stop. Wait till I do it. Clap your hands really fast, 10 times really fast, and then I want you to rub your hands together, and then we're going to clap really. You have to clap really hard, otherwise it doesn't work, okay? Ready? On your mark, get set, go. Rub your hands together. Feel the heat. You're working out, man. This is a workout, all right? Now we're going to clap our hands again. This time we're going to do it 8 times. Okay? Ready? 1, 2, 3, 8. Rub your hands together. Oh, my God. Oh, why does this have to be so hard? All right? Okay, we're going to do it again. This time 5 times. All right? 1, 2, 3. Oh, rub your hands together. Almost there. We're going to do this again 10 times, and I promise we'll be done. 1, 2, 3. Put your hands really super close together without touching your hands, not anyone else. Put your hands close together. Move them up and down. Back and forth. You should feel something, a force in between there. Can you feel it as you move further? The force that you feel in between there is your animal magnetism. Hey, no, just kidding. The force that you feel, who's ever heard of this idea of an aura? Okay, you guys can all sit down. Thanks for giving a standing applause, That force that you have is the energy that surrounds you. So we put that out into the universe, positive things as we go and we create that. Hey, everybody's out of breath. Except Patricia. Yeah, she worked out 7 hours this morning. All right. So story time really quick. When my son, the firstborn, was going to be born, I was going to have a baby here, me and my partner. I phoned my grandmother and I let her know. Man, she was super excited and pumped. Deadly, she said. I wanted to raise my children to be more indigenous than I had the chance growing up. You see, my grandmother, namoya nantaw ginahiwit, nugumigiyupigit basimo, niya basimo, puatak. I'm a Assiniboine. Even though I'm mostly Cree, my grandmother raised me to be a Assiniboine. And I was so pumped because I was raised in a home where she made a conscious effort to ensure that Nakota culture and way of life was important. So when my child was going to be born, almost time I went to her and I talked to her and I said, hey, what do I do as a father to ensure that I'm going to bring my kid into the world as a Assiniboine? So she told me, really cool protocol when children are born, what we do and how we do that and create that. She made this effort. Beautiful story. I was so pumped in my mind. I'm like, I'm doing everything. I'm going to do all of that. Everything she said, I'm going to do it. And she built it all up and then she stopped at the end. She said, oh, but my boy, your children are Cree. I was like, nah. What do you mean? You raised me to be Nakota, I said. What do you mean my kids are Cree? She looked at me, she said, their mother's Cree, so who they are is Cree, she said. You go talk to your mother-in-law and ask her what the protocols are around that. I was like, oh my God, I got to talk to my monster-in-law, all right? So this is going to happen for real, I was thinking, and she's sitting here. She's awesome, I like teasing her. She always gets mad when I'm on the mic because I roast her, But I don't talk to the Cree side because that's not protocol. I talk to the Métis side, so that's okay, all right? So she's half Métis. That's supposed to be, you guys are supposed to laugh. That's not funny or what? Okay. Anyway, so I went to her and I talked to her. And she was asking me just different questions and, telling me, and she told me something really important. She said, something I learned I want to share with you. She said, introduce yourself in Cree. And I thought, nah, she's a Cree teacher. I was like, oh man, she's going to just tear me apart here. Chris, Nitsigasan. Yes, she goes, good. What does that word mean, Nitsigasan? I was like, my name is? No. I was like, they call me? No. I don't. And she's like, our language, she said, describes the world. It's descriptive. It's a descriptive thing, which is why everything's so funny when we speak our language, because in our mind, we see it happening. We see things going on. And I was just thinking, oh, what if they tell dirty stories, real deadly Cree minds, Anyways, that's not appropriate right now. But so I asked her, she said, the root word, she said, is mitsi. Means your belly button. And I was like, Netch. Chris Scribe, my belly button. And then I remembered old people, when we'd visit with my grandmother, they'd say, look at that kid. Look at Chris. He's looking for his belly button. And I used to think, shit, that's a weird thing to say to somebody. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me because look, my belly button's right here. I ain't looking for nothing. And she told me Cree protocol that we do, that the umbilical cord of our mothers feeds our children. And the creation story that we're told is that a spider web shot his web for us to travel on. And that web is the umbilical cord, so it's a connection to the spirit world. And in that connection, it has power and it has strength. And our mothers carry our children. They eat everything our mothers eat. They drink everything they drink. They feel all the things that they feel. And it's a sacrifice to bring our children into this world. And my grandmother, when she told me their mother's Cree, so your children are Cree, she was talking about the same point, about that concept of matriarch, that concept about honoring our women and what that means for that. And that when we introduce ourselves in the Cree language, we're describing something. We're saying, Chris Scribe, I exist on this earth because a mother brought me here. She fed me through an umbilical cord and it connects me to my ancestors and the Creator. And the protocol that's shared, and it's similar between cultures, is that when the belly button falls off our children, we place that belly button it's somewhere that we make a wish for our children. So you want your child to be somebody that's book smart, you put the belly button in a book. You want them to be a hard worker, you'll take that belly button, you'll place it on an anthill, and you'll make this wish. My best friend, he went to, his son's belly button came off and he went to an Oiler game. And he took his son and he threw that belly button on the ice of Rogers Center where McDavid skates. And he told me, he said, I want my son to be in the NHL. I want my son to love hockey. And I looked at him, I said, bro, that belly button was sucked up by a Zamboni. I said, your kid's gonna love Zambonis, man. He's gonna love cleaning the ice. He's mad. He was mad at me. He's like, that's not funny, man. You know, he's like, and don't ever tell that story, he told me. And should I tell it every single time I tell this, man? It's so awesome. That's what we do. But what they were saying when we say our children are looking for their belly button, they said they're looking for their identity. They're looking for their connection to who they are. Because who we are is rooted in our matriarchs and our mothers. It's rooted in that. Because what do we call earth? Our mother. So we're connected to these things that way. And because of that, if we don't go through the protocols and understand that, we're going to always be searching for what that is. Now, this is basically my dissertation. You know, when you do a dissertation for a university, it was through oral tradition. It was based off teachings from my father and my grandmother. And my grandmother raised me to be Indian. And some of the things that she told me and talked to me about is basically this. That we have a beautiful way of thinking as Indian people. That everything that we do is connected. That our education doesn't stop when we reach grade 12 or university, that it is ongoing, that every single person contributes to that. So when we're up as a spirit, as energy, in the stars, as they say, we are up there with our ancestors in the spirit world. And we enter this earth, and our mothers bring us here. And when we come to earth, there's a soft spot on our children's head. I don't know about any of you, but when I first seen the soft spot on my kid's head and it was moving to his heartbeat, I thought it looked like an alien, man. I'm like, this is crazy. How is that like something that's happening? But there's teachings that tell us. I hear early years educators talk about children are sponges when they're young. That whatever you tell them, they learn and they can catch on quick. It's fast. It's just amazing. It's because they're so closely connected to Creator. We're taught that we're not to yell, hit, or show violence or anything cruel or mean to our children while the soft spot exists on their head. Because they absorb it, they take it in, and they build that. Soft spot is still there when our children first went to residential school at age 6. They absorbed all of that. At age 7, when it hardens, our children are told to play and experience life. They play games that are going to help them be successful in this world. They play games that are going to be meaningful to them, and they have fun and they talk about it. Then a change of life happens. For boys, it's when their voice changes, and for girls, it's their first moon time. These are times of celebration, of uplifting, of honoring. These are really important milestones in our lives. Because after that, they actively participate in the world as being a part of ceremony and societies. Then another change of life happens when they become parents. And it's their role to ensure that they're living healthy lifestyles so that their kids can see it, that they're providing for their family and their children, and they're showing love and kindness. But you're also taking a lead role in ceremony, in society, in governance, in health, in justice, in all of these other places. Then another change of life happens. And that's when we enter this world of what we call elderhood. When our men and our grandmothers and grandfathers become grandparents. And it's a celebration, and they become the most knowledgeable people in our communities, not because they know the most, because they made the most mistakes throughout their life. And they share those with the people so that they don't make the same mistakes. And they provide that for everybody. And then we return home back to our Creator. And the cycle continues, and this is what makes us strong. This is the foundation that we need to look at and build within our communities and our education system if we're going to save our kids. Now, a really good friend of mine, someone I graduated ITEP with 20 years ago, he told me that, Chris, you can't just go up there, be a keynote, and just talk about all the issues. Everybody does that. Think about solutions and share them. Now, just so you know, they didn't just bring someone up that has degrees. I have street cred, all right? I've taught every grade from grade 2 to grade 12. I've been a acting principal, a superintendent, a director of a post-secondary program, and now I'm a consultant. All levels of education. I've been in there as a non-classroom teacher in a spec ed environment. I've been in all of those spaces and places. So understand the different perspectives from all our education. And this is what I came up with for some advice for all of us here at MLTC. So we provide the answers. I found this picture and I just put it on there just to share it. My baby son, my big son, Camden, he's the only one that got to physically, be with my grandmother. And I looked at this and I thought, man, pictures and thoughts and these types of things take us back and we can remember things. And whenever I'd walk, I put my arm out like this so my grandmother can hold on and that she could walk. And I can feel her walking with me. I can feel her, and I'm holding my son's hand over there, and we're walking to a car. After this, we drove to the Redwood Forest in San Francisco. We made a big family trip. But we need to provide solutions for all we have. So for classroom teachers, this is for you. Number one, we need to identify the strengths and the weaknesses that we have as a classroom teacher. Quit acting like you're good at everything, okay? We can learn when we acknowledge that we're not strong in one area, okay? If classroom management is a thing and an administrator comes in and says, look, Chris, your classroom management needs some work, bro. Don't sit there and just like, what are you saying? I'm not a good teacher? Well, I'm going to hand in my resignation here. Don't say that kind of stuff. Learn from it in a good way and try and figure out how can you be better and stronger. If teaching math is a struggle for you, how do you become stronger in that area? We need to be creatively authentic. What that means is that we need to be real about our creativity. We can't take someone else's ideas and say, hey, look what I did. We need to be authentically saying, look, this is what's going on over there. Let's try to figure this out. Let's do this together. And always thinking about how we become a creative teacher in our classrooms so that kids listen to what we're doing. Teacher's job, kids don't listen to people they don't trust and they don't have a relationship with. If you're just a bot standing at front of a classroom reading a textbook, no kid is going to listen to you. They won't even show up for you. So you need to take the effort and the time to build trust. If you say you're going to do something, do it. If you say you're going to build them up and help them out and build relationships with them, do it. We need to be creating critical thinkers. You don't want to create kids that are sitting in rows of desks like the Industrial Revolution and expecting them just to say, yes, sir, no, ma'am, yes, that's the answer. You don't want that. You want people to question you. You want kids to have conversations with you, to challenge you. That's how you know you're creating creative thinkers. We need to be human. A teacher shows up at a round dance and sees their kids at that event or any kind of cultural event. They're like, oh my God, there's Mr. So-and-so. I can't believe he's here. It's just like a movie star or something. You got to show our kids that we're human beings. Go out there in an evening, if you're living in the community, and play basketball on a court after school. Make something important that they're related to. Go out there and do it. See those kids. Be human. And we need to take up space to be Indigenous. Every corner of every avenue of every classroom, you need to be Indigenous. Even the non-Indigenous teachers in this room, you need to ensure that every space in the classroom is a safe space to be Indigenous. And you can do that with support from community. Non-classroom teachers, spec ed. We are more than just standardized tests. The greatest schools in the world don't even use Fontes and Pinnell. Think of other ways to support our kids with special needs and exceptionalities. That designating them as a poor reader in grade 3 doesn't mean anything. That we have to think beyond that, beyond just being a standardized machine. Indigenous knowledge is not feathers and medicine wheels put on, Fontes and Pinnell worksheets, DRAs, or reading about a teepee in a DRA booklet. That's not what it is. It's ensuring that maybe kids with exceptionalities, with behavior issues, maybe we smudge those kids first in the morning. Maybe we center them around some mindfulness. Maybe we think about, playing some music that's Indigenous for them before we start. We need to capture our children from failure. This means we need to be uncomfortable. Working with kids with exceptionalities and kids that need special work is not like comfortable work. It is hard, it is difficult. It makes us uncomfortable, but we need to take that space up and absorb that uncomfortableness, because if you're feeling uncomfortable teaching in this environment, think about the kids you're working with. We need to access local knowledge, and that is necessary for growth. We think that we have all the answers when we're working with these kids and that with exceptionalities. We think we have all the answers. We don't. Sometimes having a conversation with an elder and connecting them to the land is going to be more powerful than any, psychoanalysis that they could have. EAs and support staff. Stop doing the job of photocopying. I don't know if there's EAs in here, but tell a teacher to photocopy their own damn stuff. Okay? You guys don't need to be photocopying. You have an essential role in working with kids. And that essential role is building relationships within the community. The most connected people in the community are our EAs. Also, don't just rely on saying, I don't know how to do that, so I'm not going to do it. Quit being an EA if that's your attitude. Go out and learn Advance your knowledge so that you can help the kids that need your most attention. Get yourself into a position where you're going to be valued and needed in that classroom. Get the education portfolio holder to photocopy. Get them to go out and, start the buses or whatever jobs you have EAs doing. Get someone else to do it. The EAs play a crucial role in helping and building our kids up. My favorite part, educational leaders and administrators. You have one of the most important and least appreciated roles to ever be alive, aside from chief and council. They're a little bit worse off than you, okay? But administrators, everything falls on your shoulders. A staff member was partying all weekend, doesn't show up, falls on your shoulders. A kid gets apprehended by CFS, falls on your shoulders. Staff, make a mistake in the classroom, falls on your shoulders. So you're the one that's responsible to lead the kids and lead the school and lead everything. And we think that we can do it all and build it all. We can't. These are your roles. Is that you, as an administrator and a leader in your school, your job, if you're in a First Nation school, your job is to make sure that you indigenize it. Everything. Every single thing needs to be indigenized in your school and in your system. Take up space everywhere. That means, how do we do our subplans? Let's do it through an indigenous lens. How do we ensure that when people are requesting a leave for a PD, that there is some way that we're indigenizing that thought process? The most non-indigenous space in every single organization is also the most important thing to a lot of administrators, and that's finance. Your finance departments are really focused on a Western colonial ideal of thinking. Every single one. I don't care if you have the deadliest, most awesome CFO that's, from the reserve that speaks the language. The way that they deliver finance is very, very colonial. And it doesn't allow for us to really build on creating space. For me to be here today, I had to fill out 14 pages of financial documents, including justification of my credentials to be able to speak as a keynote. I also needed to incorporate and submit a resume and a CV. I also needed to make sure that when I got onto this place that I wasn't a criminal. So all you guys that are up here, that's probably a good thing I said. You don't want criminals talking. But these things are all there. And then after that, very, very, very informally, very, very, offensive, like, why do you, now you have to sign a 7-page contract. These are very colonial ways of thinking. I understand we need to be accountable. That's not what I'm saying. But there's an Indian way to approach that's still accountable. We also need to make sure that when we get into those spaces that we're not just going in there guns blaring with no solutions and thinking about it. We got to think about how we approach every decision that we do and make sure it's building and supporting our kids in our school. When something goes right, you uplift the people that are working on the ground to do that. When something goes bad, it's your job to take the bullets. It's your job to stand in front and take the hits. That's what an administrator does. We need to create and design our leadership around the concept of being a servant. Leaders are servants to the people. Leaders are servants to the young people. Leaders are servants to the community. And it's not a job that's easy. When I finished high school, like I said, I grew up with a single parent home and all that kind of stuff, and we didn't have much money. And I went to my grandmother and I said, I'm going to work on oil rigs. So I went and worked on oil rigs before education. And it's rugged, man. I mean, anybody that worked in a oil patch or oil field, back when I did it, over 20, probably 25, 26 years ago. Grand Prairie, Alberta. I mean, you think Wynyard was bad. Shit, man, go to Grand Prairie, Alberta and be the only Indian working on an oil patch 2 hours north of civilization. So we're in that space and enduring this, rugged environment, this rugged situation. I get home at Christmas on a break, it was a break for the rig. Get home at Christmas and I look at my grandmother. And those that have been raised by their grandparents understand and know that, there's a kind of a sense of guilt, for me anyway, that my grandmother had to raise this young boy in her golden years when she could have traveled and visit and going out, but she was stuck looking after this little kid. And I always felt guilty that she had to do that. She had to sacrifice her money, sacrifice her time and her ability to travel because she had to raise me. So I had $20,000 in a bank account. And one time I asked my grandmother when I was a little kid, I said, how much money do you make a year? Ina. And Ina and Assiniboine is mom. And that's what she was to me. She was my mom. I said, how much money you make in a year, Ina? And she told me $14,000. But that's because I get veterans allowance, she said. If I didn't get that, we'd have less. And I was like, holy shit, 14,000, man, that's lots of money. So much money. I was just like, man, how do you just not drive a Rolls Royce, And then I come to realize now as an adult, I was like, holy smokes, 14 grand. How is that even possible to live and survive? I don't ever remember going without. She was an Indian first before anything. Once a month, we got to go to town to get groceries, North Battleford. And she'd allow me to pick my favorite cereal. So I'd go up there and I'd get Lucky Charms or whatever it was. I'd pick it. So pumped about these Lucky Charms, man. I'd get home. We'd sit around and then all of a sudden visitors would come. They'd visit, they'd talk, and they'd have this really good conversation, laughing. And she'd say, my boy, go get a box from the porch. I'd go out there, I'd get a box, and she'd put it on a counter. And she'd load up all these groceries. She'd grab my cereal, put it in that box, and I'd watch my cereal walk out the door. And I'd be just like, why? She just gives everything away, man, all our good stuff. Fridge would be empty, now the cupboards are empty. But it all comes back. So I went home at that break and I told my grandmother, I said, Ina, anything you want. Anything you want, Mom, I'll buy it for you, I told her. You want a new car? You want to go on a trip? You want new regalia? I said, I'll get it. I'll buy it. I have money. Give you that. She said, oh, my boy, she said, I want to tell you a story. When I first went to Brandon School, at Christmas time, I was selected to comb the nun's hair. So I got to comb the nun's hair. I got to brush it. And after I was done brushing the nun's hair, the nun reached into her desk and she brought out 2 licorice rock candies. And she put those 2 licorice rock candies on my hand. She said, oh, my boy, I went back. Put them in my pocket. I went back. She said, one of them, she said, I hid and I put it away. The other one, I had 1 lick a day, she said. Oh, I remember, she said, the last lick I had, it disappeared on my tongue. At the end of the school year, she said, a truck came and got all of us kids that were going to Treaty 4 from Brandon. And off we went. And it stopped on the edge of the reserve. And I could see my brother over there waiting. She said, my boy, she said, this was a year after my mother passed away. And it was only my dad and my older brother that looked after all of us siblings. And it was hard, she said. Man, I loved my dad so much. I loved him so much. He was so kind and he worked so hard for us. My brother came over there with 2 horses. One was bareback and one had a saddle. And the one that was a saddle was my brother George's. And nobody had a saddle in the reserve, very few people, because they were poor. But my brother got off that horse with the saddle and he said, "Mary, ride my horse." Oh, I felt special, she said. And I got on that horse and she said, I rode. And my brother followed me on horseback. She said, I went running up, galloping up, then I could see our house where we lived. And I seen my papa, she said. That's what she called her dad. I seen my papa and I jumped off that saddle and I ran and I sprinted, she said. And I gave my dad a big hug. I missed him so much. I loved him so much. And she used the word love. My grandmother went to residential school and I can count on my hands the amount of times I heard her tell me that she loved me or use that word. And I was one of them. And she looked at her dad. She said, I loved him so much. And she reached in her pocket and she got out that licorice rock candy. And she went and she placed that on her dad's hand and she said, Dad, I got this for you. It tastes so good, she said, and I saved it for you. I missed you so much and I knew that you would enjoy this. And it's all I could give you and I wanted to give that to you. She said her dad took it. He looked at his little girl and he started to cry, she said. He started to cry. He was so thankful that a 7-year-old was able to hold on to one little piece of candy because that was the only thing she can think to give to her father. And how difficult that would have been for her. And he hugged this girl. My grandmother stopped telling me the story and looked at me. She said, my boy, I want to ask you a question, she said. I said, what? Growing up with me, were you happy? And I looked at her, I said, yep. I said, you're the best. This was the best, I told her. We didn't have very much money, she said. We didn't really have anything extra. You didn't get anything extra. She goes, my boy, she said, money isn't everything. It's how we live our life that's important. And you giving me this, offering this gift to me, now, she said, I know how my dad felt when I gave him that candy. But I want you, she said, to spend that money on something you want. I don't need anything, my boy. I have everything I need, she goes. You worked hard for it. Do something. And at that point, I was mad. I was a little upset because I worked so hard. It was such a rugged ordeal to live in that oil rig life. But my grandmother raised an Indian before anything else. And as Indian people, we have an opportunity and a path laid before us. But as human beings, we can decide to take it or not take it. But a path is laid there for us, an opportunity for us. Somewhere in your journey as a teacher, a path was laid for you to be where you are. And somehow, in shape of way, in the great design, you found your way into the classroom. My sister called me and said, Chris, there's one seat available in the ITEP Thunderchild program. It's yours if you want it. And my grandmother said, money isn't everything. The creator and the great design is laying this over here. I said, okay, I'll take it. And we started on this path. And it gave me to and brought me to a place to speak to all of you beautiful people. So I know that the driving force and what we're capable of is really defined about how much money we have. But if we really truly believe in doing what's best for our kids, we're going to find a way. And that shouldn't be a barrier to what we have. We need more teachers, let's find a way. We need more EAs, we need a program, let's find a way. We need to bring Cal Arkan and his $15,000 fee, they'll find a way. I don't pretend to be an expert in anything. I don't. And I wish there was some magical keynote that you can invite that can change the realities in our schools. But that's not a reality. What I prayed for before I came up here is that my relatives that are in this audience take something from what I said here today, and you start a spark and take it home and build a fire. And with that fire, you burn down your colonial systems of education and rebuild it into our own vision of what it means to be Indian education. That's the hope and prayer that I had before this. And that's all I give you, is a spark. And I hope you all take it in the best way that you know how, and do what you can to help our kids, because, man, they need it. They need us. And this education could be a weapon of destruction, or it could be a weapon of healing. Let's do the latter. Let's do the latter for our children. Hi, Pinamaya. Thank you all for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the conference. Ksam.
Thank you. Good job. I think I was in one.